Have you ever wondered what wisdom a lifetime brings? Imagine sitting down with someone who's seen nearly a century of life, the ups, the downs, and everything in between. Today we're sharing powerful words from a remarkable 91-year-old woman, words that hold valuable lessons for us all. These aren't just stories. They're insights, truths, and reflections on life that most people don't know, but everyone should hear. Get ready because what she has to say might just change the way you see things. Let's dive in. Marcos was burdened with a deep sense of worry, wrestling silently with personal issues that seemed too private to share one. Afternoon, after much hesitation, his cheeks flush with shyness, he mustered the courage to approach Dona Esperanza, the woman who had always exuded warmth and wisdom, and gently asked her a question that had been weighing heavily on his heart. "Don't Esperanza." He began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Can I ask you something personal? I've been wondering about masturbation in old age." Her response was immediate but tender, her lips curling into a soft, reassuring smile that made him feel safe with her usual grace. In soothing voice, she started to share a deeply personal story, one filled with both vulnerability and strength. "Ah, dear Marcos," she said, her eyes sparkling with understanding. "I remember well the uncertainty and self-doubt that crept into my mind when I first began thinking about this. I was already in my 70s, a time when the world around me seemed to slow down. My children, all grown, had moved on to their own lives, and my grandchildren were blossoming into adults creating families of their own. Suddenly, I found myself in a quiet, almost unfamiliar solitude. The house that once echoed with laughter and life became a place of reflection, where I spent hours alone with my thoughts, my memories, and the undeniable awareness of how my body had changed over the years." She paused, her voice tinged with emotion as she recalled the feelings of shame that had once clouded her mind. "At first, I was overwhelmed by embarrassment. Could a woman my age who had lived so many years still feel desire? It seemed improper, almost forbidden to entertain such thoughts. But those feelings didn't disappear, no matter how hard I tried to ignore them. They were a part of me, and I realized that I owed it to myself to explore them." Taking a deep breath, Dona Esperanza continued, her words filled with wisdom and compassion. "I spoke to my doctor, a kind woman, who assured me that what I was feeling was perfectly natural sexuality," she explained. "Doesn't have an expiration date. It's woven into the fabric of our lives from our youth to our twilight years." Armed with this knowledge, I began a journey of self-exploration, though I must admit it was not easy. At first, there were moments when I felt lost in a sea of doubt and uncertainty, questioning whether I had the right to seek pleasure at this stage of life. But then she said, her voice softening with nostalgia, "Something beautiful happened little by little as I allowed myself to embrace my desires. I discovered that masturbation wasn't just about physical pleasure, it became an intimate act of self-care. It was a quiet, sacred time where I could reconnect with myself, my body, and my emotions. In those moments, I felt alive, not as an old woman resigned to her years, but as someone still capable of joy and passion." If you're still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment one below to let me know that you are still here with me. Her eyes grew misty as she reflected on the transformation that had taken place. "I began to notice subtle changes. My anxiety, which had been my constant companion, started to melt away once. Restless nights turned into peaceful sobers, and perhaps most profoundly, I started to view my body through a lens of acceptance and love. The wrinkles and lines that crisscrossed my skin, once symbols of aging, became a testament to the life I had lived, each one telling a story of strength, resilience, and survival." She looked at Marcos with deep sincerity. "Masturbation taught me more than I could have imagined. It wasn't just about satisfying a need. It was about embracing who I was, with all my flaws and imperfections. It taught me the importance of self-compassion, of treating myself with the same kindness I had always shown to others. I learned that pleasure isn't bound by age, and that we all deserve to experience the joy our bodies can bring us, no matter how many years we have walked this earth." Her words hung in the air, filled with emotion and wisdom, leaving Marcos both comforted and enlightened. Dona Esperanza's story was more than an answer to his question. It was a testament to the beauty of self-discovery and the power of accepting one's desires, even in the later stages of life. Of course, not everyone around me understood my perspective. Dona Esperanza continued, her voice carrying the weight of the judgment she had once faced. There were whispers, sideways, glances, and people who were quick to criticize, to cast their opinions on matters they could never fully understand. But despite the judgments, despite the moments of isolation, I stood firm in my conviction. I realized that sexuality is not just for the young. It's an integral part of being human. No matter our age or circumstance, it is woven into the fabric of our existence, a force that connects us to ourselves in the most profound way. She leaned in slightly, her eyes locking with Marcos as if willing him to absorb the depth of her next words in the end. What truly matters, what transcends all the noise and opinions of others, is how we feel about ourselves, our bodies, our desires, our experiences. They belong to us and us alone. So Marcos, I urge you, don't let shame or guilt weigh you down. Your desires are not something to be hidden or denied. Masturbation in old age, just as in any other stage of life, can be a source of profound well-being and self-discovery. It's an act of listening to your body, respecting it, and allowing yourself to savor the pleasures that life still offers you. Marcos sat there feeling the warmth of her words wash over him like a balm. He nodded slowly, the tension he had carried in his shoulders for weeks beginning to melt away. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that life and sexuality were not dictated by the expectations of society or the ticking of time. They were deeply personal, unique journeys. One's connection with their body and soul was theirs to navigate, to cherish self-care and self-respect. These were not luxuries, but necessities fundamental to thriving at every stage of life. From that day forward, Marcos embraced Dona Esperanza's wisdom. Her words stayed with him, a reminder that the journey of self-love and self-understanding never truly ends, it simply evolves. Meanwhile, in the same quiet village not far from where Marcos lived, there was Don Anselmo, a 75-year-old man whose infectious sense of humor and knack for storytelling had earned him the affection of everyone in the town. He had a gift for weaving tales that left his listeners not only entertained but also reflective, stirring up thoughts that lingered long after his words had faded into the air. One sunny afternoon, as Don Anselmo sat sipping his coffee in the village plaza, he was joined by Sofia, an old childhood friend whose face still held the glow over youth, despite the years that had passed. But today, Sofia's expression was different. There was a certain vulnerability in her eyes, a hesitation in her voice as she sat down beside him after a few moments of small talk. She finally let out a sigh, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Anselmo," she began quietly, looking down at her hands. "I've been feeling a bit confused lately about my body, my sexuality. I didn't think it was something I'd be thinking about at my age, but here I am feeling ashamed and unsure. I don't know if it's normal." She glanced up at him, her face now a deeper shade of pink. "Can I ask you something? What do you think about masturbation at our age?" Don Anselmo chuckled softly, not in mockery, but in the way a man does when he understands too well the burdens of another's heart. He put his hand gently on hers, his touch full of warmth and reassurance. "Sophia," he said, his voice steady, "you and I have lived long enough to know that the heart and the body never truly stop feeling. No matter how many years we've walked this earth, the world may tell us that old age is a time to fade into the background, to let go of things like desire, pleasure, and connection. But I don't believe that for a second. Our bodies, just like our hearts, are still alive with need, with longing, with the ability to feel deeply and profoundly." He paused, giving her a moment to take in his words. Masturbation, like many things in life, isn't about the age we are. It's about staying connected to ourselves, to our bodies. It's about recognizing that the need for intimacy, whether it's with another person or with ourselves, is a part of who we are. And that's nothing to be ashamed of, in fact, he said, his eyes twinkling. It's something to celebrate. Sophia looked at him, her expression softening as the weight of her embarrassment began to lift in Don Anselmo's words. She found not only comfort, but also validation. She wasn't alone in her feelings, and there was no need for shame. Life, as Don Anello had so often reminded her through his stories, was meant to be lived fully with joy. humor, and a deep connection to one's true self right up until the very end, as they sat together in the plaza, the sun shining down on them. Sophia felt a sense of peace settles over her. She understood now that just like Marcos had learned from Dona Esperanza, there was nothing wrong with embracing one's desires, regardless of age. What mattered most was how she felt about herself, and in that moment she felt free. The village might have been quiet that day, but for Marcos, Dona Esperanza, Don Anselmo, and Sofia, the lessons they shared would resonate like whispers of truth carried on the wind, touching the hearts of those ready to listen. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment below to let me know that you are still here with me. With a warm and understanding smile, Don Anselmo gently placed his hand on Sofia's, his touch filled with empathy and reassurance. He could see the unease in eyes, the uncertainty that often came with confronting personal emotions. Society had long kept hidden. He took a deep breath and decided to share a piece of his own story, one that he had kept to himself for many years. "Sophia, my dear friend," he began softly, "I understand your concerns. All too well, society has ingrained in us this belief that sexuality is reserved for the young, that once we reach a certain age, we are no longer allowed to feel desire or seek pleasure. But the truth, my friend, is far more complex and beautiful. Let me tell you a personal story, one that helped me see things differently." Don Anselmo's face softened as he recalled the time after his wife's passing a few years ago. "After I lost my beloved wife, I was plunged into a deep loneliness. My children had moved far away, living their own lives, and while they visited when they could, most days I was left alone with my thoughts. The house, once filled with love and laughter, became quiet. In that silence, I began to reflect not only on my emotional state, but also on my physical and intimate needs. I remembered conversations with my youth with close friends, where we talked about the importance of staying connected to oneself, even in the absence of a partner." He paused, his voice tinged with vulnerability. "At first, the idea of masturbation at my age felt strange. I won't lie, I was uncomfortable. I thought it was inappropriate, that perhaps I had no right to feel these desires anymore. I wrestled with the shame of it, the voice in my head that said I was too old, that intimacy and pleasure were things I should have left behind with my youth. But then as I sat alone in that quiet house, I started to reflect deeper. I realized that the need for intimacy, for connection, for pleasure, these are not that disappear with age. They are part of who we are, part of being human." He looked at Sophia, his gaze steady and filled with understanding. "One night after a particularly long and lonely day, I decided to set aside my discomfort and permit myself to explore the side of myself again. At first it felt awkward, and I didn't know quite how to relax into it. I was clumsy, hesitant, and unsure of what I was doing or how it would make me feel. But little by little, as I let go of the guilt and the fear, I began to relax. I allowed myself to be present in the moment, and something incredible happened. I felt a sense of liberation, a peace that I hadn't experienced in years." Don Anselmo's eyes grew misty as he continued. "It wasn't just about the physical pleasure, Sophia. It was about reclaiming a part of myself that I thought had been lost. Masturbation became for me a way of caring for myself, a way of connecting with my body in a way that was gentle, respectful, and loving. Over time, I noticed that it helped me manage the stress and anxiety that had been building up inside me. I felt calmer and more relaxed. I slept better at night, free from the restless thoughts that used to keep me awake." He gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "But more than that, this practice helped me to accept the changes in my body. With grace and dignity, I stopped looking at my aging body with disdain, and instead I began to appreciate it for all that had carried me through the wrinkles. The stiffness, the slower pace, they weren't signs of weakness. They were signs of a life well-lived. Masturbation allowed me to reconnect with myself, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. 2, it taught me to love myself in ways I hadn't known I could." Sophia's eyes filled with emotion as she listened to Donna Andelmo's story. His vulnerability, his honesty had touched her deeply. She no longer felt embarrassed or ashamed. Instead, she felt a profound sense of understanding and relief, knowing that she wasn't alone in her feelings. "Thank you, Anello," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I never expected to feel this way at my age, but hearing your story, it gives me hope and permission to embrace this part of myself without shame. Don Anello smiled warmly at her, the lines on his face softening with compassion. Sophia, there's no shame in seeking pleasure and caring for yourself. No matter how old we are, our bodies may change, but our need for love, connection, and self-compassion never does age. Is just a number. What matters is how we feel inside. So don't deny yourself the right to explore your intimacy, to find joy in your own body. It's a gift that you deserve at any stage of life, at that moment, sitting together in the plaza. Sophia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Don Anselmo's words had given her the courage to embrace her desires, to seek pleasure without guilt, and to honor her body with the love and respect it deserved. As they finished their coffee, Sophia no longer felt like an aging woman questioning her worth. She felt like someone who was still growing, still learning, still discovering new depths within herself, and that she realized was the true beauty of living. The journey of self-acceptance and self-love never really ends. Masturbation in old age has been one of the most eye-opening experiences of my life. Don Anello began, his voice filled with gentle wisdom. It taught me that pleasure doesn't come with an expiration date, and that taking care of oneself in every sense is vital for a truly fulfilling life. We spend so much of our younger years worrying about others, expectations about what's appropriate, that we often forget to show kindness to ourselves. But through this practice, I came to realize that I deserve the same compassion and understanding I would offer to a dear friend. My desires, my needs. They're not something to feel guilt or shame over. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. He paused, glancing at Sophia with a knowing smile. Of course, there will always be those who don't understand, who judge or cast their opinions without truly knowing. But Sophia, I've learned something important in all these years. The only opinion that truly matters is how we feel about ourselves. Life is too fleeting, too precious to spend it weighed down by fear or regret. We owe it to ourselves to live fully without denying the parts of us that crave love, intimacy, and connection, whether it's with someone else or with ourselves. His words seemed to carry more weight as he leaned in, slightly emphasizing their importance. So, Sophia, I say this with all the care in my heart, don't ever be ashamed of your desires. Masturbation, even in old age, is not just a way to satisfy a need. It's a healthy, natural way to maintain both physical and emotional well-being. It keeps us in tune with our bodies, helps us listen to what we need, and allows us to find comfort and joy in the simplest of pleasures. No matter how many years we've lived, we still deserve to enjoy the pleasures that life has to offer. Your age doesn't define your worth, nor does it define your right to feel. Sophia sat quietly, absorbing Don Anselmo's heartfelt words. She had come to him with uncertainty and hesitation, unsure of how to reconcile her feelings with the image of how she thought she was supposed to be at her age. But as she listened, she felt something shift inside her, a sense of peace, of validation. The weight of shame that had settled so heavily on her chest began to lighten. She realized that her sexuality, her need for intimacy and pleasure, was as natural and important now as it had ever been. It wasn't something to hide or feel guilty about, but something to embrace with tenderness and self-compassion. As Don Anselmo's words continued to echo in her mind, Sophia felt a newfound sense of freedom blossom within her. From that day on, she vowed to treat herself with more care and love, following the example of her old friend. She would no longer deny her desires or be ashamed of her body's needs. Instead, she would honor herself, knowing that true fulfillment comes from accepting and loving oneself completely at any age. Don Anselmo watched her with a warm, understanding smile. He could see that Sophia had found the comfort and clarity she sought, and in that moment, both of them understood a profound truth. Life's greatest journey is not just in seeking external love, but in cultivating a deep and unwavering love for oneself. As we reflect on the beautiful conversation between Don Anello and Sophia, we're reminded that self-compassion and self-acceptance are essential at every stage of life. Sexuality, intimacy, and self-care do not have an age limit. They are part of who we are, no matter how many years we've lived. So now we ask you, what have you learned from this story? Take a moment to think about one thing you've discovered or realized and share it in the comments below. How will you bring this lesson into practice in your own life? Thank you so much for watching. I hope these wise words from this remarkable 91-year-old have inspired and given you something to think about. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more content like this. Don't forget to share it with someone who could use a little wisdom in their day. Until next time, stay curious, stay wise, and remember that sometimes the most powerful truths come from those who have walked a long path. See you in the next video.